Thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak. We're going to talk about the experiences with mutational testing in GIST in the USA. My name is Denise Montoya, and I'm the Director of Patient Registry and Tissue Bank in the LifeRef Group. So mutational testing is widely available in the US, as was mentioned before. The cost of mutational testing varies from $400 to $5,000 and more. It really depends on the nature and complexity of the test. So despite the strong guidelines from organizations such as the NCCN and CAB recommending testing, the testing rate for GIST patients is very low. However, in the US, only 26% of patients diagnosed with GIST have received mutational testing. We are happy, however, to show that 55% of patients in the LRG patient registry have received mutational testing. As we can briefly see on the right on the chart, we can see how per year the rate of testing has increased. If we compare the number from 2016 to 2020, we can see a high increase of almost double the number of testing. But as it was mentioned before, why is mutational testing so important? So as we know that the selection of appropriate treatment and dosage was very established during this meeting, also the substantial impact on overall survival among patients, also because it helps to avoid potentially harmful and definitely unnecessary side effects for an ineffective treatment for patients. And it recently had many publications about the negative economical impact among patients, among payers, and among pharmaceutical companies providing the wrong treatment to the wrong patient, and therefore having a negative impact on cost. So one of the questions prior to this presentation was the barriers and limitation, given that, as we mentioned, testing is widely available in the US. Why are patients not getting mutational testing? So this was a question that the LifeRef Group wanted to address. So last year, despite all the challenges that 2020 had, we conducted a mutational testing survey where we assessed the barriers that may have an impact on patients' ability to receive mutational testing. We have 295 patients and caregivers that participated in this survey from all over the world, and we were able to analyze the different impacts. And some of the common things that we came up with are these 4 factors. The first factor being the care and management. Who the patient was being treated by, so the oncologist, and also the facility where the patient was treated at, were big factors that had an impact on the patient getting or not getting mutational testing. This was also widely observed in different parts of the country. And for example, bigger states, patients that are located in bigger states like California, like New York, Florida, they had a higher percentage of testing than patients that were in very smaller states like Kansas. Another thing is specialists, patients that were treated by local oncologists and did not seek for either a second opinion for a specialist or didn't work with a specialist tend to have a lower rate of mutational testing. And moving to the next factor was the patient awareness and knowledge of testing. Many patients reported not knowing what a mutational testing was, and also confusing the terminology. Many patients will say to us, I have a KIT mutation, when in reality, it was just a c-KIT positive stain. Or we observe that with SDH, patients will have an SDHB positive staining, and then they will report saying, I have an SDH deficiency without a genetic testing. The third factor that we observed was the cost of testing, which it was mentioned before too. Insurance not always covers advanced testing. Depending on the patient location, they didn't have enough resources to pay out of pocket for testing if the testing wasn't available in their country, or in the US, in their state, wasn't covered by their insurance. Last but not least was specimen availability. Many patients reported due to the lack of tissue or biopsies of surgery, they were not able to obtain mutational testing. Also, low risk patients that did not need treatment, in some cases didn't get, and it's understandable, didn't get mutational testing. So moving on to, we have assessed the barriers. What is the LifeRef Group doing in the US and to offer an increased testing? We have launched our biomarker testing campaign, which is called It's Time. You probably have seen it in all our social media and websites, which aims to improve the understanding of biomarker testing in the cancer community and to increase the number of patients tested. And I think, okay, thank you. Another thing that we're working on is a tissue testing initiative. Given that I have mentioned before that cost was one of the limitations of testing, advanced testing, we have been testing patients for NGS just to find these very high level mutations. Last year, despite all the challenges, we're happy to share that we tested 45 patients and they were able to see a mutation. Another thing that we're working on is increasing awareness to empower this community to receive and prescribe testing. We have hosted webinars with key stakeholders to highlight the importance of testing, and we're going to continue to do that over the years. We have created materials and resources to educate patients about the importance of testing, and we're working on translating these resources into 5 different languages to increase the outreach among all the countries. We are publishing peer-reviewed publications with data from our registry and surveys. And lastly, we're working on educating and informing payers about the economic value of testing. Another thing we're working on is medical advisory board. As you may know, last month we have established our medical advisory board, and one of the quick and greatest thing that we just conquer was we endorsed a mutational testing declaration to call attention to the physician community to raise their voices with the goal of creating an optimal standard of care for all these patients. This will really target the oncologists, and as we know from the previous slide, the oncologist is kind of like the first point with a patient that increasing testing and the way paving the pathway to testing is important for them. Another thing we're working on is increasing collaborations among institutions. We continue our efforts to build a strong relationship among institutions and advocacy groups to help us raise our voices towards our goal, which is increased testing. And last but not least, we provide patient assistance within the patient registry. As soon as we talk to a patient that joins the Life group, the first thing that we ask after their names, we ask if they have gotten testing. Of course, if it's a metastatic advanced patient and that it's undergoing treatment, we are like, do you know your mutation? Are you on the right treatment? And also we connect them with just specialists. At least we try to do that. And with telemedicine now being a big factor now, we have really utilized that as our source to connecting patients. And we provide information about the process of testing, as well as to connect patients with labs. In some cases, there are patients that don't have access to labs near the area that they live with. So we facilitate the testing with our labs. And with that, and I know timing is as key here, I'm just going to transition this to Canada. Oh, David, I don't.
Thank you, Denise.
Right, I will share screen when I can. Can I share screen?
Yes, I think.
So taking the plane to Canada now.
Yep, going north.
Okay, everybody see the slides?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a very interesting session. I will just tell you briefly where we are in Canada with our initiative to increase the rate of mutational testing. I was asked to talk about these categories of questions: availability, cost, misconceptions, and advocacy activities. So I will touch on those briefly as we go along. So how do I get to the next slide? Hang on. Yep. So Canada, a huge country and a rather decentralized country. So things are very complicated for healthcare. Healthcare is funded primarily through the federal government nationally, but the administration of healthcare is left to the individual provinces and territories. And of course, the delivery comes down to local hospitals and university hospitals and clinics. So it's a very diverse situation. The procedures differ from province to province, even from hospital to hospital. So I'm going to give you some examples of the situations that we encounter across Canada. Let's begin on the West Coast in British Columbia. as an example of how GIST is handled. British Columbia is unusual in having a very centralized cancer care system, centralized on one agency, the British Columbia Cancer Agency. And they're also lucky to have some very proactive oncologists like Dr. Xiaolan Feng, who I will mention a couple of times, and pathologists like Dr. Chenghan Li. So there's an activist, GIST expert medical community. They're trying very hard to get GIST sent for mutational testing. Most are, but not all, as I will show you in a minute. This is done centrally and there's no cost to the patient, as is generally the case in Canada. When it is done, it's done without charge to the patient. There's some of you may know there's an International Sarcoma Symposium held in Toronto every year. It's now in the 4th year. It was held online just last month. And there was a presentation from Dr. Fung and co-workers in British Columbia entitled Utilization of Mutational Analysis in GIST in British Columbia, Retrospective Study. This was partly funded by a grant from the Life Raft Group Canada. And just to summarize the data that they presented, they analyzed the proportion of metastatic GIST patients receiving mutational analysis in BC. And you'll see that it's partly due to the work of these dedicated oncologists that the number is going up. It's now up to about 80%, but still not 100%, even in metastatic GIST. So the conclusion then, even in a rather forward-looking system in British Columbia, centralized cancer care system, and with just expert oncologists advocating for mutational analysis, it's still not obtained in some of the metastatic cases. It's not yet universal. Second example I'll give you is in the middle of Canada, the province of Manitoba, rather a small population. The only really big city is Winnipeg, and I think there's really only 1 or 2 oncologists treating most GIST patients in Winnipeg, one in Winnipeg, and he has a rather different approach. He doesn't do mutational testing immediately. He starts all of his metastatic GIST patients on imatinib. Then immediately, very quickly, after 4 weeks, they do a PET scan. And I put an exclamation mark there because in most places in Canada, it is difficult or even impossible to get routine PET scanning for GIST, but they seem to have that available in Winnipeg. So he does a rapid early measurement of response by PET. And then if there is a poor response to imatinib, he sends out for mutational testing, but not if the patient responds. Now let's look at the probably the best place to be if you're a GIST patient in Canada is in Toronto, the biggest city in the country, which considers itself to be the center of the universe, at least in Canada. Toronto has many world-class research hospitals and some of the top sarcoma and GIST oncologists in the country. Generally, if you're being treated in Toronto, you're going to see one of those top specialists like Dr. Albi Razak, and pretty much all of the GISTs are being sent for mutational testing in a Toronto lab without cost to the patient. So probably the best situation in Canada is in Toronto and probably also Montreal, the biggest centers. But it's a huge country. So look at Ontario, there are many patients being seen and treated in community hospitals. Just want to emphasize the size of the territory we're dealing with. For example, suppose you're in Kenora in the western extreme of Ontario, you're not that far from Winnipeg, and it would probably make a lot more sense to go to Winnipeg for treatment, but the medical care system is primarily arranged provincially, so you probably won't have the opportunity. You may be asked to go to Toronto. Driving from Kenora to Toronto is about the distance of driving from Amsterdam to Naples, Italy, 1900 kilometers. So you can see there's a huge barrier here just in terms of logistics. So This is true in Ontario and quite a few other provinces, that patients being seen in community hospitals may have little or no access even to a sarcoma specialist, let alone to a GIST specialist. Typically, the doctors, if they request mutational testing, might have to send the samples a long way, maybe to Toronto. It can be done, but typically they're going to have to request funding approval to do that from the administrators of the local hospital, who may not be well informed. And certainly we have experience with a few doctors who are reluctant to order mutational testing, even when the patient requests it. Okay, I'll take a moment to talk about misconceptions and barriers. And I've divided these into patients, doctors, and systemic barriers. So among the patients, of course, there's the issue of general lack of knowledge concerning GIST. There's also the issue, as I will talk about for just a moment, about confusion between immunohistochemistry testing for KIT expression, which we heard discussed earlier by Dr. Rosenberg, versus mutational analysis. That is, quite a few patients are confused and they think they've had mutational analysis, when in fact all their pathology report shows is a c-KIT test by immunohistochemistry. With regard to doctors, again, a general lack of knowledge concerning GIST, it being a rare disease, a lack of knowledge about specific and especially new treatment options in clinical trials. And then there's just general clinical inertia that people may not be up to date with the latest treatments. With regard to systemic barriers, as I've already mentioned, there are provincial barriers, there are institutional barriers within hospitals. There's a bureaucratic problem of getting approval in some cases. There's a logistic problem of the size of the country. Just mention briefly this issue of confusion between immunohistochemistry testing, standard pathology testing for KIT protein expression, versus DNA testing, mutational testing. This is a major source of confusion for patients. I'm not going to go over this slide in detail, but I just want to note that I have put this slide together as a simple explanation for patients of the great difference between these two kinds of tests. So if anybody's interested in that slide, this slide, I'm happy to send it. You can access it after the talk. Last slide, I want to take a moment to talk about our advocacy efforts. We, like the US group, recognize the importance of improving access to mutational testing. We've been well aware of that for years. We did provide some funding to Dr. Xiaolong Feng for the study I mentioned earlier in British Columbia. So finally, in December of last year, we held a national workshop on this topic, doing it online, of course. We had about 20 people participating, patients, oncologists, pathologists, and some pharmaceutical reps. We've used that occasion to survey the situation across the country. We've prepared a draft report, which is now being reviewed. May try to get it published. Our next steps will be a follow-up meeting where we hope to develop a work plan for oncologists continuing education and for further identification and removal of the institutional barriers. Unfortunately, of course, due to the pandemic, our progress on this file has been delayed. It's hard to get responses from any doctors right now because of the preoccupation with the third wave of the COVID pandemic, but we're trying to get this moved along as quickly as we can. And that's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
And we move on to Chile, please. Piga.
Yes, hello. I'll try to share my screen from the other side of the, oh, sorry. Hold on, give me a second, please. Exit from screen. Okay, now, yes. Can you see my screen? Sorry.
Not yet.
Not yet. Sorry. Can you, hold on.
You have the button, the share screen button at the bottom of the Zoom window?
There you are. No.
I have your presentation prepared if you want me to share the screen.
Yes, can you? But let me. Oh no, there we go. Ready.
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay, but I want to have it. Give me a second. The screen on. Okay. Well, good morning, good evening. I'm on the other side of the world, back here in Chile, in Santiago, and I tried to summarize in 3 minutes what I wanted to tell you, but I want to share you of a program that we're developing that it's called a molecular multi-center registry for Chilean GIST patients. This is a collaborative project between Fundación GIST Chile, STORM, which is the support team for oncological research and medicine, and with the support of a grant from Pfizer. Before I talk about this project, I want to give you a little background. Mutational testing here is requested. Sorry, oops. What happened? Sorry. I don't know what happened.
Maybe press cancel.
Yeah, share, cancel.
And then on the presentation mode again, yeah.
There, am I there?
Yes, but this seems the
let me
last
go
slide.
back.
So if you go back.
Yeah, okay. Today, mutational testing is requested for all GIST patients who have an indication of pharmacological treatment. The cost here of a KIT PDGFA mutational testing costs around $360. And if you realize that half of the Chilean workers have a monthly wage of equivalent to $570, it's quite expensive that most of people can't afford it. And it is not covered nor by the public health system, nor by the health insurances. And we were very lucky that between 2010 and 2015, with the collaboration of the LifeRef group, we were able to make 28 studies at the OHSU. And about how people are informed, these patients, when they get to the specialist, they're quite well informed. They explain them quite well what the mutational testing means. And also, when they come, they are registered in our foundation. We try to educate them and explain them the importance of the mutational testing, how it is performed, what are we expecting with the results, and of course, mainly, which is the importance. And there's a general feeling among the patients that with providing their tissue or making their tissue sample, the mutational testing, they are not only benefiting them, making a benefit for them, but also for fewer patients and also for investigation. So which is this program? We were supposed to start in 2020, but because of COVID, it was delayed and we just started this year. And it is an ongoing project. It's led by Dr. Marcelo Garrido. He's just a specialist, and STORM, as I told you, with the support of Pfizer. And the objective is just to describe our population's KIT and PDGFA mutational frequency in order to give the patient a personalized medicine approach and also provide us with data and evidence in order to advocate for drug access. Because here in Chile, the only two drugs that are covered by the health systems is just imatinib and sunitinib. Those are the two ones that are approved. And up to now, we have been able to make 32 studies, and they are performed at the pathology lab of the Catholic University. We are in our foundation, we have 110 patient registered, so we still have a lot more where to go. And the problem that we have mainly is because the patient had to go to the clinical or hospital where the surgery was made to have their tissue sample, bring it to us. And as many of us have been in quarantine for a long time, that has slowed the process a lot. So, but we hope that we're going to be lucky and move forward as fast as we can. How we promote this? We made through social media, we've sent a mailing to all oncologists along the country to tell them about this program, and tell them it's completely free for the patients, so they get offered to them. Also through social media, we made a short video showing which is the importance of the study and which are the steps that they can follow. At the first place, they have to go to their doctors, ask for the order, then go to the hospital where the surgery was made to retrieve the tissue sample, bring it to us. We take it send it to the lab, to the pathology lab, and once we have the results, it is sent to the patient and also to the doctor, the treater, the doctor who's treating the patient. So everybody has the information. So I tried to just squeeze everything in 3 minutes, but any question? There was in the previous slide, there is a link for the video. It's an animation, it's very short and very didactic if you ever want to see them. And that's it. That's what we've done. My name is Piga Fernandez. I work for the LiveRef Group as the Global Relations Coordinator. I'm the founder and president of Fundación GIS Chile and of ACHAGO. This is the Chilean Association of Oncological Patients Group. So that's it. If you have any questions, sorry, but my sharing my screen wasn't very, very professional, but I think that's it.
But you made it. Thank you, Piga.
You're welcome.
So then we move on to India. Vandana, please.
Good evening from India, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I must say that we don't have a really formal group helping out patients of just guiding into nutritional analysis or going in for those type of things, but it's all based with the doctors. So the doctors have to decide, because there can be many reasons. It can be the lack of knowledge, it can be lack of resources, David mentioned that in Canada there is no resource available, or it is only done free by the hospital. So maybe it's that reason, but we really don't have it. But I must say that we have in the last 7 years I'm talking about one hospital, which is Tata Memorial Hospital, based in Mumbai, which is the biggest center for treatment in India. And in the last 7 years, they have seen 500 patients on GIST, which include those who have come for follow-up and also for treatment. The three main type of GIST that are seen are spindle cell, followed by epithelioid type, and the rest, which cover about 10%. c-KIT is the most highly mutated gene which is identified, and it is done before surgery in this new adjuvant setting. And everybody has mentioned, before surgery it is given to shrink the tumor, then KIT mutation is done, and everything else is the same, like everybody has mentioned. So in short of, I know that time is less, so I won't go into the details, but all the medicines which have been mentioned, like repatinib, regorafenib, and also avapritinib, are all available to our patients, along with suited and also imatinib. So the medicines and the scope is there. There was a study which was done here, which was done a couple of years back, which included a total of 83 patients with metastatic GIST were available for analysis. Median age was 54 years with a 3:1 male predominance. Stomach was the most common site of primary, with liver being the most common site for metastatic situation. c-KIT mutation analysis results were available for 44 patients, with exon 11 mutant being the most common mutation. And that was done. And there was a 10-year estimated progression-free, and overall survival was 18% and 51% respectively. Overall response rate to the first-line imatinib was 37.6%, and estimated 3-year overall survival to first-line therapy was significantly better for exon 11 mutated patients. 34 patients received second-line therapy in the form of either sunitinib, papazipanib, or increased dose imatinib with a clinical benefit of 73.5%. c-KIT mutated patients had a better median OS compared to non-mutated patients. So, GIST diagnosed and treated in the Indian subcontinent appears to show improved outcomes. The importance of c-KIT mutation analysis in determining the prognosis and outcomes of patients with advanced GIST is emphasized. Again, to tell you about, there's really no big advocacy group which is happening, and I would be happy if we can do something in India about it. And also the finances, only if the doctors are putting you in a trial or in a study, then it can be taken care of. Otherwise, it's very difficult for patients to pay for the treatment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piga. Then we move on to Europe, and our next stop would be in the Netherlands. And Gerard, please.
Okay, thank you. I will try to stay within the 3 minutes. So I'll move on quickly. In the Netherlands, mutational testing is available to every patient. The cost is covered by insurance, so no cost for the patient. We have in the Netherlands 5 centers of expertise for GIST, where they have the best knowledge and experience. There is also a special registry for all the patients, all the GIST patients in these 5 expert centers, where they do quite extensive registration of data. I have asked them, what is the percentage of mutational testing in your centers? And it's 82%. My first reaction was, why isn't it 100%? Because I would like to know the mutation in every single GIST patient, but obviously there are low risk cases where it's not absolutely needed if no treatment with medication is necessary. Now, in these expert centers, I can also mention that there is several of those centers are involved in a study which is going on already for several years, where they do circulating tumor DNA testing, liquid biopsy, which is of course quite important to decide on treatment in case of progressive disease. In the expertise centers, 50% of all GIST patients are treated, which means that half of the patients are not treated in an expert center, but in a general hospital. Several of these hospitals have a quite close relationships with the expertise centers, so they get advice of experienced GIST doctors. We have a national registry where they can tell you how many patients are tested mutationally. And also in these other hospitals, the percentage of mutational testing is 80%. So it's about the same as in the centers of expertise, which I think is quite good. In general, I think patients are well informed. They have access to information. We play a role there as patient organization as well. And what is left for advocacy? Well, as I mentioned, I would like to know also the mutations in the 20% cases that are not treated, because, well, it may be helpful for further research. And the main question for us is the patient treated in the appropriate place? So, as I mentioned already, several of the general hospitals, of the local hospitals, have a close relationship with expertise centers, but there is not, it's not, the overall situation is not quite clear to us. So this is something for the next couple of years that we want to know which hospital has a working relationship with an expertise center. And for those who do not have such a relationship, why not? And do they treat GIST patients or not? The last point, I think, well, as you mentioned already, we see a process of development of networks of excellence, of, let's say, satellite hospitals around the 5 centers of expertise, and we will closely follow that. I'll leave it to that. Thank you.
Okay, then last but not least, we move on within Europe and to Germany. So back to Markus, please.
We just stop the presentation.
Yes, I do that. Just a second.
Okay, so I try to be very brief. Can you just see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. As I already mentioned in the beginning, we have seen a change within the organizations during the last 2 years. So we are used to run an organization called Das Lebenshaus here in Germany, taking care of GIST and sarcoma patients. And we did this from 2003 to 2019. And then we switched the organization and changed the organization in January 2020 to the German Sarcoma Foundation. So I'm just reporting the situation that has been developed with Das Lebenshaus previous years ago to see how we get to our today's situation. So today, the mutational testing rate today in Germany is about 80 to 90%. So most of the patients really get mutational testing as early as possible. We just have seen our tri-national GIST meeting a few weeks ago with patients from Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And this was the similar rate, about 90% of all patients receive mutational analysis. So we are on a high level. So the question is, what have we done to come to this level? And I think one of the major issues is that we work very close together with experts, patients, and industry, and we realized the importance of GIST mutational testing very early. So we have had the first discussions around about 2006, 2007, how we could work on mutational analysis to move this forward step by step. So we did since 2008 several roundtables that has been supported by industry to share our experience, but also to think about what can we do to improve mutational testing in Germany. So it's a long-term process. So we're doing this now for the last 12, 13 years. One major impact was done by, and you already met her today, Eva Wadelmann. She was one of the major drivers when it came to the quality of mutational analysis. And there was part of these roundtables where 6 labs in Germany, they took part in these roundtables also to test each other. So how to carry out mutational testing correctly, what are the potential pitfalls and how to avoid these pitfalls to come up with standard procedures. And this is a publication from 2010 done by Eva Wadelmann and her colleagues. And she was really the main driver in bringing the quality of mutational analysis forward in Germany. And you have heard from her talk, her previous talk, that we are still, in these days, we are talking about the Sanger sequencing and not about next generation sequencing. So these has been the early days, more or less, of mutational analysis. So this was one of the driver to involve more and more labs, pathology labs in Germany in so-called ring trials or open trials to test each other and to come up with a with a high level of quality in doing the mutational testing. Beside these activities, we did a lot of intense communication and information in all different directions. That means the experts did a lot of communication and information into the direction of the expert community. We as patients, patient representatives, did a lot of communication and information into the patient community, and also the industry. They did a lot of work specifically with Novartis and Pfizer to advocate and to drive mutational analysis forward. Another important topic was to establish mutational testing as an important factor in our national GIST treatment guidelines, in different articles, in different books. So we did a lot of information and communication on different channels to establish mutational analysis in Germany. For example, we also created a series of trainings in Germany. It's called the Tri-National GIST meeting with Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And we invited doctors coming from Friday lunchtime until Saturday lunchtime to do a lot of case studies, including discussing about mutational analysis. My feeling is all this together, all the engagement of people like Eva, but also Peter Reichert, and also Sebastian Bauer, and a lot of different other people driving everything forward in the same direction, that really helped us in moving forward with mutational analysis during the last years. And we also, as I mentioned before, we did as an organization, did a lot of work in information education, patient advocacy, referring patients to GIST experts, doing a lot of materials and information, videos, and a lot of stuff really to inform and support the patients during the last 12, 13 years on mutational analysis. So this is the new board now of the new organization, and you will realize some of the usual suspects here, like Peter and Eva and different other people. But these have been also the people who drove this forward. And we are now working together in this new organization, where patients and experts are working together under one umbrella to fight sarcomas and GIST together. And so our main focus now for this year and for the upcoming year is to focus on rare and super rare GIST subtypes and about the information and therapy option. So we are not any longer talking about standard mutational analysis. We are really talking about what about the rare and super rare GIST subtypes. And you already have seen these complicated slides, and we want to move this forward. So how are we going to test these patients? Who are the right people who test these patients? But also, how are we going to inform the patients and support the patients when it comes to these rare and super rare GIST subtypes? So I think that was just a brief overview. Something like traveling into our history during the last 12, 13 years. And it was a long evolution, not a revolution overnight. So thank you very much for this.